You don't belong here, sweetheart. Step back before I put you in bracelets. Officer Harlan Shaw's voice dripped with venom, his hand hovering aggressively over his Glock 19. Jade Rivers didn't flinch. She just stared at his brass badge. "You have no legal grounds to ask me to move," she replied, her voice eerily calm, echoing in the quiet courtroom. "Watch me," Shaw sneered, violently lunging forward. He slapped the cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists, completely unaware that he had just arrested his absolute worst nightmare, the new chief of police. The heavy oak doors of the Cook County Circuit Court swung open with a slow, agonizing creak that echoed through the cavernous, marble-lined halls. It was a humid morning, and the air inside the building smelled faintly of floor wax, stale coffee, and the quiet desperation of the justice system. In the front row of courtroom 302, a section explicitly marked by a tarnished brass plaque reading, "Reserved for Law Enforcement and Legal Counsel," sat a woman who looked entirely out of place. Jade Rivers did not look like a lawyer, and she certainly didn't look like a cop. Dressed in faded Levi's denim jeans, a comfortably oversized Yale University sweatshirt, and scuffed white sneakers, she looked more like a lost tourist or a tired graduate student. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy utilitarian bun, and a pair of thick, black-rimmed glasses rested on the bridge of her nose. In her lap lay a battered black moleskin notebook, the pages densely packed with shorthand notes. Jade was observing. She was watching the gears of a broken machine turn. After a decorated career as an elite special agent with the FBI's anti-corruption unit in Washington, D.C., the mayor of this embattled city had personally begged her to take over the local police force. The department was plagued by scandals, excessive force lawsuits, and a deeply ingrained culture of corruption. Jade had agreed to take the job, but on one condition. For her initial days in the city before her official swearing-in ceremony and press conference, she wanted to wander the city completely incognito. She wanted to see the rot for herself, unfiltered by the polished brass and rehearsed salutes of a formal inspection. And she was finding it. Oh, she was finding plenty of it. Her eyes were fixed on the witness stand, where Officer Harlan Shaw was currently giving testimony. Shaw was a textbook example of everything wrong with modern policing. He was a physically imposing man, heavily muscled with a tight buzz cut. His uniform stretched tight across his chest to show off his physique. His posture was arrogant, his tone condescending, as he answered the public defender's questions with exaggerated sighs and eye rolls. What caught Jade's sharp, trained eye, however, wasn't just his terrible demeanor. It was the heavy, gleaming silver watch on his left wrist. It was a Rolex Daytona, a timepiece that retailed for well over $20,000. On a patrol officer's modest salary, that watch screamed extortion louder than a siren. As Shaw concluded his highly questionable testimony that Jade immediately recognized as a poorly constructed lie meant to justify an illegal search, he stepped down from the stand. The judge called for a brief recess. The courtroom began to empty, murmurs filling the space as lawyers shuffled their papers. Shaw strutted down the central aisle, his heavy leather duty boots echoing sharply against the hardwood floor. As he reached the front row, he stopped abruptly. His eyes narrowed, landing on Jade. He looked her up and down, taking in the faded jeans and the oversized Yale sweatshirt. His lip curled into a sneer of pure disgust. To a predator like Shaw, Jade wasn't a person. She was a target, a nobody, an opportunity to exercise power. "Hey!" Shaw barked, his voice cracking like a whip through the thinning crowd. "Can you not read, or are you just stupid?" Jade slowly stopped writing. She capped her pen, placing it deliberately on top of her notebook. She looked up, her expression a mask of absolute, unreadable calm. "Excuse me?" "The sign," Shaw said, stepping closer, aggressively invading her personal space. He tapped the tarnished brass plaque with a thick, calloused finger. "Reserved for law enforcement and legal counsel. You don't look like a lawyer, and you sure as hell don't look like a cop. So, get your skinny ass up and move to the back with the rest of the civilians before I drag you back there myself." Jade didn't move a muscle. She simply stared at the shiny silver badge pinned to his chest. Badge number 8442. She committed it to memory. "The courtroom is in recess, officer," she replied smoothly, quoting municipal code with effortless precision. "During a recess, seating restrictions in the gallery are temporarily suspended unless otherwise ordered by the bailiff. Furthermore, as a taxpayer and a citizen, I have a First Amendment right to observe public trials. I am perfectly fine right where I am." Shaw's face turned a dangerous mottled shade of crimson. In his world, in his precinct, nobody spoke back to him. Certainly not a scruffy woman in a college sweatshirt. The veins in his thick neck bulged against his tight uniform collar. He leaned in so close that Jade could smell the peppermint gum he was aggressively chewing, masking the faint scent of stale cigarette smoke. "You don't belong here, sweetheart," Shaw hissed, his hand dropping to rest intimidatingly on the grip of his Glock 19 sidearm. "Step back before I put you in bracelets." The courtroom, which had been buzzing with low conversation, suddenly fell, dead silent. The few remaining lawyers, clerks, and civilians turned their heads, their eyes wide, watching the confrontation unfold. They knew Officer Shaw's reputation. They knew this was about to end badly for the woman in the Yale sweatshirt. Jade Rivers' heart rate didn't even spike. In her time at the FBI, she had stared down cartel hitmen, human traffickers, and corrupt politicians. A bloated, steroid-fueled bully with a badge was nothing but a minor inconvenience, but she needed to see exactly how far he would go. This was the ultimate stress test for her new department. "I am giving you a lawful order to vacate this section," Shaw growled, taking another step forward, his chest nearly brushing her notebook. "An order is only lawful if it is backed by statute, Officer Shaw," Jade replied coldly, having read his nameplate. "You are acting outside the scope of your authority. I strongly suggest you walk away. You have no legal grounds to ask me to move." "Watch me," Shaw sneered. Without warning, Shaw's hand shot out. He grabbed Jade's left wrist with brutal force, his thick fingers digging painfully into her skin. He yanked her violently out of the wooden bench, pulling her to her feet with such force that her moleskin notebook clattered to the floor. Jade's voice remained unnervingly steady, though her eyes finally flashed with a dangerous icy fire. "You have exactly a moment to remove your hand before you ruin your entire career, officer." Shaw laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Ruin my career? Lady, I am the law in this building." With a practiced, aggressive motion, he spun her around, forcing her arms behind her back. He pulled his heavy-duty Smith & Wesson Model 100 handcuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratcheting metal teeth echoed sharply in the silent courtroom as he clamped the steel tight around her wrists. He squeezed the cuffs an extra notch, purposely making them tight enough to bite into the delicate skin of her wrists, cutting off the circulation. It was a classic bully tactic designed to inflict maximum pain and humiliation without leaving a mark severe enough for a hospital visit. "You are under arrest," Shaw announced loudly, making sure the remaining spectators could hear him assert his dominance. "On what charges?" Jade asked, staring straight ahead at the mahogany paneling of the judge's bench. "Failure to obey a lawful order, disturbing the peace, and resisting arrest," Shaw rattled off smoothly, listing the standard contempt of cop charges used by corrupt officers nationwide to punish anyone who bruised their fragile egos. Shaw shoved her forward, forcing her to stumble slightly to catch her balance. "Let's go, criminal. Time to see how tough you are in a holding cell." The perp walk through the bustling hallways of the Cook County Courthouse was designed to break the spirit. Shaw kept his hand firmly on Jade's bicep, pushing her through crowds of onlookers. Defense attorneys stopped and stared. Defendants in cheap suits whispered to each other. Jade kept her head held high, her face a mask of absolute stoicism. She felt the cold steel of the handcuffs digging into her skin, the sharp pinch, a constant reminder of the absolute failure of leadership in this police department. They exited the courthouse into the blazing afternoon sun. Shaw shoved her roughly toward his patrol vehicle, a heavily armored Ford Police Interceptor utility. He opened the rear door and placed his hand on top of her head, not to protect her, but to forcefully push her down into the hard plastic seats of the cramped back seat. "Enjoy the ride, sweetheart," Shaw mocked, slamming the heavy door shut. Inside the cage, the air was stifling, smelling strongly of stale sweat, vomit, and cheap industrial disinfectant. Jade sat in the claustrophobic darkness, the hard plastic digging into her cuffed wrists. As Shaw climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, the radio crackling to life, Jade finally allowed a small, incredibly dangerous smile to touch her lips. Officer Harlan Shaw thought he had just asserted his dominance over a nobody. He thought he was taking out the trash. He had no idea that he had just strapped a lit stick of dynamite to his own career, and the fuse was burning shorter by the second. The drive to the 12th precinct was a masterclass in unprofessionalism. Officer Shaw drove with reckless abandon, taking corners too fast and accelerating harshly at stoplights, purposely throwing Jade around in the back seat. Every time she slammed against the hard plastic divider, she could hear Shaw chuckling in the front seat. He even turned up the volume on the radio, blasting heavy rock music to drown out any complaints she might make. Jade didn't complain. She sat in silence, analyzing every second of the protocol breach. No seatbelt applied to the prisoner, reckless driving, failure to read Miranda rights. The list of internal affairs violations was growing so long, she was mentally drafting the termination paperwork in her head. The interceptor lurched into the secure parking bay of the 12th precinct. Shaw hauled her out of the back seat with the same unnecessary roughness, marching her up the concrete steps and through the heavy steel doors of the booking area. The precinct was a circus. Phones were ringing off the hook, officers were shouting across the room, and a group of visibly intoxicated individuals were handcuffed to a long metal bench, yelling obscenities. The walls were painted an institutional, depressing shade of pale green, peeling at the corners, and the floor was slick with years of accumulated grime. Shaw paraded her over to the booking desk, where a portly, balding man with a sergeant's insignia was slowly typing on a greasy keyboard. "What do we have here, Ollie?" Sergeant Cole asked, looking up from his screen with a bored expression, chewing on a matchstick. "Got a live one, Sarge?" Shaw said proudly, roughly shoving Jade against the high desk. Failure to comply, disturbing the peace, threw a fit in Judge Harlan Voss's courtroom, refused to leave a restricted area. Oh, and put down resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. She tried to kick me when I was cuffing her. Jade's eyebrows rose slightly. Falsifying an official police report. That was a felony. "I did no such thing," she stated clearly. "And there are at least 20 witnesses in that courtroom who will testify to that fact." Sergeant Cole laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. Yeah, tell it to the judge, lady." "Name?" "Jane Doe," Jade replied smoothly. Shaw scowled, grabbing her shoulder. "Give him your real name, you stupid, or what?" Jade interrupted, turning her head to lock eyes with Shaw. The sheer intensity of her gaze actually made the larger man take a half step back before he caught himself. "You've already arrested me. You've already falsely accused me of assault. I decline to identify myself until I'm granted my constitutionally guaranteed phone call." Cole rolled his eyes. "Put her in cell 4. Let her cool off. We'll run her prints later when she stops playing games." Shaw marched her down a narrow, reeking hallway, lined with iron bars. He shoved her into cell 4, a filthy concrete box containing nothing but a steel toilet and a metal slab for a bed. He finally unlocked the handcuffs, practically ripping them off her wrists, leaving bright red, angry welts on her skin. "You get comfortable in here," Shaw sneered through the bars as he slammed the heavy iron door shut. The lock engaged with a loud, final clang. "You're going to be sitting in your own stink for a long, long time." Jade rubbed her wrists, watching him walk away. The cell smelled like ammonia and despair. She walked over to the bars and leaned against them. "Officer Shaw," she called out, her voice echoing down the cell block. Shaw paused at the end of the hall, turning back with a smug grin. "What, ready to beg?" "I want my phone call," she demanded. "Now." Shaw sighed, shaking his head. He walked back, pulled a filthy cordless phone from a wall mount, and shoved it through the bars. "Make it quick, and don't call a lawyer. Call a bondsman. You're going to need a lot of cash." Jade took the phone. She didn't dial a lawyer. She didn't dial a bondsman. She dialed a private, unlisted cellular number. It rang twice before it was picked up. "Sterling," a deep voice answered. "Elias," Jade said calmly. "It's Jade." Mayor Elias Grant let out a hearty laugh on the other end. "Jade, I was just about to call you. The press is already setting up at City Hall. The podium is ready. The brass is all polished. Where are you? The press conference to announce your appointment as chief is coming up soon." "There's been a slight change of plans, Elias," Jade said, inspecting the grime on her fingernails. "I won't be able to make it to City Hall." "What? Why? Are you stuck in traffic?" The mayor's voice rose in panic. "No," Jade replied, a cold, hard edge creeping into her tone. "I am currently locked in holding cell 4 at the 12th precinct. I was unlawfully arrested, physically assaulted, and maliciously charged by one of your officers, Officer Harlan Shaw, badge number 8442. There was a dead, horrifying silence on the other end of the line. The silence of a politician realizing his city's police department had just committed the ultimate catastrophic blunder. "I am on my way," Mayor Grant whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of absolute terror and volcanic rage. "I am bringing the commissioner. Do not move." "I don't plan on it," Jade said. She hung up the phone, slid it back through the bars, and sat down on the cold metal slab. She crossed her legs, closed her eyes, and waited for the explosion. A short time later, in the bullpen of the 12th precinct, the atmosphere was relaxed, lazy even. Officer Shaw was sitting at a desk, his feet kicked up, sipping a massive iced coffee, and bragging loudly to Sergeant Cole about how he had handled the crazy woman at the courthouse. He was halfway through a fabricated story about how she had swung a purse at him when the heavy double doors of the precinct didn't just open. They violently blew open. The noise in the precinct died instantly. Telephones stopped ringing. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Striding through the doors with the momentum of a runaway freight train was Mayor Elias Grant. His face was a mask of furious, boiling crimson. Flanking him on his left was the city police commissioner, a man who looked like he was about to suffer a massive cardiac event. Flanking him on his right was the outgoing acting chief of police, sweating profusely through his dress uniform, and trailing behind them like a swarm of hungry locusts were a dozen reporters with heavy cameras, boom microphones, and flashing lights. They had been waiting at City Hall, and the mayor had simply told them, "If you want the real story of this city's future, follow me." Officer Shaw's feet hit the floor with a thud. He stood up, hurriedly brushing donut crumbs off his uniform, his mind racing. Why was the mayor here? Why the press? Was this a surprise commendation? Had someone caught his courtroom heroics on camera? He quickly plastered on a confident, winning smile and stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Mr. Mayor," Shaw announced loudly, trying to sound authoritative and respectful. "Welcome to the 12th Precinct. If you're looking for the captain, he's—" "Shut your mouth," Mayor Grant snarled, not even breaking his stride. He walked right past Shaw, as if the massive officer were nothing more than a piece of unwanted furniture. Shaw froze, his smile shattering. He turned, watching in utter confusion as the mayor, the commissioner, the acting chief, and the entire press pool marched directly past the booking desk and headed straight for the holding cell block. Mr. Mayor, sir," Sergeant Cole stuttered, scrambling out from behind the desk, his face pale. "You can't go back there. It's an unsecured area. We have violent offenders back there." The commissioner spun around, pointing a trembling finger at Cole. "Stand down, Sergeant, or I will take your badge right here, right now." Cole swallowed hard and glued himself to the wall. Shaw, a cold sweat suddenly breaking out on the back of his neck, followed the entourage at a distance. His heart began to pound against his ribs like a jackhammer. He watched as the mayor stopped dead in front of cell 4. The camera crews jostled for position, their bright white LED lights illuminating the dark, filthy cell block. Through the iron bars, sitting calmly on the metal slab, illuminated by the harsh glare of the camera lights, was the woman in the Yale sweatshirt. Mayor Grant gripped the iron bars, his knuckles turning white. He looked at the red welts visible on her wrists. He closed his eyes for a brief, agonizing second, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "Do you have the keys, Commissioner?" the mayor asked, his voice deathly quiet. The commissioner scrambled forward, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the master key into the lock. Clang. Click. The heavy iron door swung outward. Jade Rivers stood up. She smoothed out the wrinkles in her faded sweatshirt. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like an apex predator stepping out of a cage she had allowed them to put her in. She walked out of the cell, the camera shutters firing off like machine guns, blinding white flashes capturing every second of the historic moment. Shaw pushed his way through the reporters, his face a portrait of utter devastating confusion. "Mr. Mayor," Shaw stammered, his voice cracking. "Sir, with all due respect, you can't let her out. She's a violent vagrant. She assaulted me in the courthouse. She resisted arrest." Jade stopped. She turned her head slowly, fixing her cold, piercing eyes on Officer Shaw. The silence in the hallway was so absolute you could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. Mayor Grant turned to Shaw. The look of disgust on the politician's face was absolute. "Officer Shaw," the mayor said, his voice carrying clearly to every microphone in the hallway, "allow me to introduce you to the woman you just illegally arrested, physically assaulted, and threw into a concrete box." The mayor gestured toward Jade. "This is Jade Rivers, former special agent in charge of the FBI's anti-corruption task force." The mayor paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air. "And as of this morning, your new chief of police. If a human being could physically shatter, Officer Harlan Shaw would have disintegrated into dust right there on the grime-covered floor of the 12th Precinct." All the blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. His knees visibly buckled, forcing him to grab the iron bars of the adjacent cell just to stay standing. His mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land, but no sound came out. The cameras continued to flash, immortalizing the exact second a corrupt cop's career evaporated into thin air. "Okay, Chief," Shaw finally managed to squeak out, his voice high and thin, completely stripped of its former bravado. I didn't know. I thought you weren't in uniform. You didn't identify yourself." "Is that your defense, Officer Shaw?" Chief Jade Rivers asked. Her voice was no longer soft. It was the sharp, commanding crack of a military general. "That your blatant abuse of power, your use of excessive force, and your complete disregard for civil rights are acceptable as long as the victim isn't wearing brass stars on their collar. She took a slow, deliberate step toward him. Shaw shrank back, pressing himself against the bars. He was a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than her, but in that moment, she was an absolute giant, and he was an insect. "You didn't ask for my identification," Jade stated clearly, speaking for the record, ensuring every microphone caught her words. "You demanded I move from a public space where I had a legal right to be. When I informed you of the law, you resorted to violence. You placed handcuffs on me with malicious intent to cause pain. And then you brought me here and instructed your sergeant to falsify a police report with fictitious felony charges." No, Chief. That's a misunderstanding," Shaw pleaded, his hands raised in surrender, sweat pouring down his face, ruining his immaculate buzz cut. I was doing my job, securing the perimeter." Jade didn't blink. "Commissioner," she said, without turning her head. "Yes, Chief Rivers," the commissioner responded immediately, standing at rigid attention. "Relieve Officer Shaw of his weapon and his badge immediately." "Sarge!" Shaw yelled, looking wildly down the hall at Sergeant Cole, desperately seeking an ally. But Cole was staring at the floor, looking like a man preparing for his own execution. The commissioner stepped forward. With trembling hands, he unclipped Shaw's duty belt, the heavy Glock 19 falling away. He reached up and unpinned the silver badge, number 8442, from Shaw's chest. The metallic sound of the badge coming off seemed to echo louder than anything else in the room. "Chief, please!" Shaw begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic sob. The tough guy persona had completely vanished, replaced by the desperate whining of a coward facing the consequences of his actions. "I have a family. I have a pension. It was a mistake. I'm a good cop, I swear to God." "A good cop?" Jade repeated softly. The corners of her mouth twitched into a terrifying semblance of a smile. She reached her hand under the collar of her oversized Yale sweatshirt. She unbuttoned the top button of the polo shirt she wore underneath and pulled out a small rectangular black device, a digital wiretap, a high-fidelity FBI-grade recording device. The red light on top of it was blinking steadily. Shaw's eyes bulged out of his head. "I was running an internal affairs sting before I even officially took the oath of office," Jade explained to the press pool, holding up the wire. "This department is infected with a culture of intimidation, brutality, and corruption. And I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. Officer Shaw, you just provided the prosecution with pristine, undeniable audio evidence of you admitting to battery, false arrest, and perjury." Jade turned her gaze back to the ruined man in front of her. "You don't have a pension anymore, Mr. Shaw," she said softly, but with finality. "You have a cell." She looked at the commissioner. "Place him under arrest and use his handcuffs. I believe they are currently resting on the booking desk." The sound of the ratcheting metal teeth echoed sharply in the silent hallway. But this time it wasn't Jade Rivers wearing the cold steel. It was Harlan Shaw. The commissioner forcefully pulled Shaw's hands behind his massive back, clicking the heavy Smith & Wesson cuffs into place. He didn't bother to leave them loose. Shaw winced as the steel bit into his wrists, a physical manifestation of the hard karma crashing down upon him. The perp walk out of the 12th precinct was a mirror image of the one that had occurred just a short time earlier, but infinitely more humiliating. As Shaw was led out of the precinct by the commissioner and 2 internal affairs officers, the entire squad room watched in stunned, terrified silence. The reporters flanked him, microphones shoved in his face, cameras capturing the tears of humiliation streaking down his red cheeks. The arrogant bully had been utterly broken. The fallout was swift, brutal, and biblical in its scope. The video of the press conference in the holding cell went viral globally within hours. It became the defining symbol of police reform. The next morning, Jade Rivers was officially sworn in as chief of police, trading her Yale sweatshirt for an immaculate, tailored blue uniform with 4 gold stars gleaming fiercely on her collar. Her first act as chief was an earthquake that shook the department to its core. Using the audio evidence from her wire and the subsequent investigation into Shaw's past, she uncovered a massive extortion ring operating out of the 12th precinct. Sergeant Cole was fired and indicted. A dozen other officers, all of whom had protected Shaw or participated in his corrupt activities, were suspended without pay pending federal charges. The precinct was purged of its poison. Months later, the justice system finally came full circle. The heavy oak doors of the Cook County Circuit Court swung open. But this time, Jade Rivers did not sit in the gallery. She sat in the witness stand, her uniform perfectly pressed, her posture impeccable. Across the room, sitting at the defense table, was Harlan Shaw. He was no longer wearing his tight, intimidating uniform or his expensive Rolex Daytona. He was wearing a baggy, bright orange county jail jumpsuit. He looked years older, his muscles deflated, his face pale and sunken from months in protective custody. Chief Rivers testified with cold, clinical precision. She didn't embellish. She didn't gloat. She simply presented the facts, the audio recordings, and the undeniable truth of Shaw's corruption. When the jury returned after swift deliberation, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. Guilty on all counts: false imprisonment, aggravated assault under color of authority, perjury, and official misconduct. The judge, the very same judge, Harlan Voss, whose courtroom Shaw had desecrated months prior, looked down at the disgraced officer with profound disgust. "Harlan Shaw," the judge's voice boomed through the courtroom, "you were given a badge and a gun to protect the vulnerable. Instead, you used them as tools to terrorize the innocent and enrich yourself. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a danger to society. It is the sentence of this court that you serve a lengthy term in the state penitentiary without the possibility of early parole." The gavel struck the block with the finality of a coffin slamming shut. Bang! Shaw collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his manacled hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the bailiffs moved in to drag him away. Chief Jade Rivers stood up, adjusted her cover, and walked out of the courtroom. She stepped out into the blazing afternoon sun, breathing in the fresh air. The machine of justice was no longer broken. It had been repaired piece by piece, starting with the removal of one corrupt gear. She had taken out the trash, and as she walked toward her waiting cruiser, she knew the streets of her city were finally, truly safe. What goes around always comes back around, especially when you abuse the power meant to protect others. Officer Harlan Shaw thought his badge and his gun made him an invincible god among men. But he learned the hard way that true, unyielding justice doesn't wear a blindfold when it comes to deep-rooted corruption. If you loved this dramatic, satisfying tale of hard karma and ultimate justice, make sure to show your support with a like right now. It really helps the channel grow and tells the algorithm you want more. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our thrilling story times. Share this video with a friend who loves a mind-blowing plot twist and seeing a bully get exactly what they deserve. What would you have done if you were in Chief Jade's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video for more shocking, true-to-life dramas.